be fun. A couple minutes left.
Ready to do that.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So, can you see me here?
Yep.
All right, I don't want to delay. So hello everybody, my name is Mario Gonzalez, just based out of here, out of Texas, Central Texas, just north of Austin and Footerville. I am the owner of Hair Craftsman Salon, and it's a little small salon studio here in Footerville. So I'm going to be doing a men's grooming tutorial for you today. I got my model Riley, longtime customer, that is going to be, who volunteered to be my model. And we're going to be doing a little short taper and kind of go through just from a hairstylist perspective and doing men's grooming as opposed to barbering. So I'm sure you probably noticed too that a lot of the new styles that are coming in, you're getting a lot of the low tapers and different kinds of custom fades and tapers that are basically leaning more barber heavy, but as a stylist you're having to kind of learn to be able to do those yourself. And so I'll kind of show you my take on it. Now, I'm not a barber, so these are my skill sets that I've kind of learned, picked up, and through other videos and just my own personal experience over the last little over 10 years, about almost 12 years, or actually almost 13 years. It's crazy, getting old. But anyway, going to go through and kind of show you that. Try not to take up a lot of your time. I've already pre-washed my model and pre-section, so we're just doing a horseshoe section just around the parietal ridge. Just going across in order to be able to do the little bit of drop taper down here, as well as doing the sideburns coming up into this. So we're going to be preserving most of the length up here. We just cut him probably a little over, almost 3 weeks ago, so he's okay with the length on top, but we will be texturizing it in order to give a little bit more texture, volume, and support to the structure of the hairstyle that he's wanting to do. So we'll be doing a little bit of that as well. But yeah, it's a fairly simple haircut. I guess the hardest part is when you start getting below like a 1 guard on any of your clipper cuts. Once you get below the 1 guard, there's a lot of detail that needs to happen in order to prevent having shadows and giving a good transition. And that takes time. Once you get below the 1, you're getting into fractions of a millimeter of difference between all the different guards. So kind of learning that nuance, if you don't have a system in place already to where you know which guards you're going to be using the majority of the time, and that can be a little bit time consuming. I know for me, I am OCD and ADD and all the DDs within the spectrum, so detail is so huge to me, and I find myself a lot of times spending more attention to detail and maybe taking a little bit longer than I would like, but to do the service. But for me, the outcome takes priority over the timing. So I try to be respectful of my customers' timing and doing all of this, but just knowing that if you do get an appointment that gets booked in to where you're having to do, like a skin fade or something along those lines, if it's something you're not comfortable with, make sure you give yourself a little extra time. And that's what I try to do as well. Give me a little bit of a buffer in there, so when I do make those final details, that I have time to be able to do that, and I'm not running into my other customers' time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So we are going to be doing a drop fade in the back, or at least a low taper in the back, and then also on the sides. So I'm going to be starting on the sides. And forgive me too, I'll be looking over at, I have a screen over here to the side I can see, but it's on a delay. So if you have any questions, please reach out, put them in the comments. Hey Amy, how you doing? I don't know, can you see the comments?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So anyway, I'm going to be doing that. So it's on a delay. So you may see me get a little frazzled. By the way, this is my first live, so bear with me. So anyway, going to be using a little cordless clipper. It's Gamma boosted from the Italian company from Gamma. They also create Stylecraft. It's got a really good motor on it, and I'm going to be using that for most of my taper. I'm also going to be using the clips from a local Texas company. Name's drawing a blank on me right now, but they are. I'll put everything in the description of all the tools that I use, and then I also have a pair of shears that I'm going to be using from another Texas company, Moto Shears, and they're really great. They're little 7-inch shears. I use them for all of my scissor over comb work, some of the detailing work, and then I'll also probably be bringing out some of the texture shears to do that as well. So without any further ado, we're going to get started. We're going to go through, and I'm going to be creating a little bit of a guideline just from the top part of what we call the C cup, which is basically that little recession that kind of comes back from the side here, just right around eyebrow, and what feeds into the sideburn. This line that I'm going to be creating is going to be a little bit of an angle, so that it tapers up into the length up here. And I'm going to be starting with my one guard, actually, excuse me, my no guard all the way open. So the little clippers right there, I'm going to be doing a lot of this tutorial just as like somebody who's brand new to the industry and doesn't know anything about anything. I know that y'all probably know all of this, but just for my mental health doing all of this, I'm going to do an instructional like you never learned it before. So forgive me if I go a little too elementary on this, and if you know it, just bear with me and extend some patience and grace out while I do it. I just want to make sure that everybody, from the beginner to the advanced person, who's way more advanced than me, gets to see the whole process and my mental thinking and how it's done. So anyway, I'm going to be going through with the one guard open, and that's that little lever. Closed is meaning that the teeth of the cutting edge or cutting blade is going to be closest to the fixed blade, and by opening it up, you're going to get a little bit softer look and a little bit more length out of that. So I'm going to start out. I don't want to put a hard line by going super close at the beginning. So I'm going to open it up a little bit bigger to begin with, and then we'll go from there. So that being open, I'm going to go through and kind of use a flicking out motion and kind of create that little bit of a guideline in there. So that is the one guard, or actually the no guard. I'm going to be switching to a one guard, keeping that blade all the way open as well. We're going to go up just a little bit higher. And then I'm going to go from that one guard, I'm going to switch over to a 1.5 guard. And I'm going to have that open all the way. And that'll be my last guard that I use on there. And now that I have that done, I'm going to brush off my clippers, and I am going to use that same no guard. I'm going to bring it down now to basically right at the closest level, so it's going to be all the way closed. And I'm going to start down here at the bottom and go up maybe about a finger's length up above the sideburn area. Just to get that a little bit closer to skin. Switch up from my comb to my brush. And now that I have that close to skin, I'm going to come back with a little electric shaver. So these are fantastic little shavers. So for those of us who are hairstylists and not barbers who cannot use a fixed blade razor, this works fantastic, and a lot of times I find that this is actually a closer shave than some of the straight razor shaves, or safety razor shaves, which we can use, so the safety razors or the little nape razors or whatever you want to do. I find that this is way faster and it works really well. So these are like, this is a Stylecraft little Uno. Gamma makes them as well as everybody else, from Andis to Wall to everybody. So finding a little foil shaver, I like having a small one that is a little bit more for detail to go around the ears, as well as I have a bigger one from Philips that takes bulk out. So where if I have an entire high and tight, I can go through that whole back section, and instead of trying to do that all with this little blade, I have a bigger one that'll just take a lot of bulk out. So I'm just going to go through underneath what I just did, that from the sideburn up to that midsection, that finger length, and use the little trim, or the little shaver to ball that out and give a little bit smoother transition coming in. And so with this, I'm actually trying to kind of create a little bit of a crescent shape with the trimmer, or with the shaver. I'm just doing little circles. And in doing so, it just helps with the blend when you're trying to blend that out. Okay, and then let's switch back to the clippers, and I'm going to be going from the completely closed just to 2 clicks up to be able to go in. And since I have this completely open here and this down to the shave, I'm going to try to blend out a little bit of this line in between those two. And feel free to ask any questions if you have any. And now I'm opening it up all the way, just as I go a little bit higher to blend out that section. And now I'm actually going to go through with the clippers, or excuse me, with the shears, and do a little bit of shear of a comb. So I'm going to go through and grab that section, and basically I'm just letting whatever is coming out and feeding out, that's what I'm actually cutting. So I'm not trying to make everything super short, I'm just trying to blend in a little bit of graduation from there to the length on the top part of that side, getting closer to that parietal. Good. Just a little bit of detail, and then I'm going to come back with some texture shears. Let me grab those real fast. And I'm going to soften that up just right above that. So I want to keep the weight line that's there, but I just want to diffuse it a little bit so it's not such a harsh weight line. Okay, and then I'm going to come back, I see a little bit of a weight line just right in here, so I'm going to come back with a 1 guard. I had it all the way open before, I'm going to close it down to halfway, 2 clicks in. And go through and blend that in. Opening it up all the way now. And that's good there. Now when I cut, I have a gamma, or a huge amount of combs. And for me, the tools make the process a lot easier. The right tools makes the process a lot easier. So I have just a regular clipper comb, kind of mimics the wall clipper comb. I usually would try to use a lot of lighter colored combs in order to have the contrast between the different hair types and hair colors. I find that most of my clients show up really well on a white comb. I have a few clients that are either all gray or almost like a platinum blonde that I use a dark comb for. But I have the traditional wall clipper comb. I have this is, Andis makes a lot of combs like this. This is one that's similar to it. It's a little bit more narrow, so you're actually able to get closer to the scalp just a bit, and you're able to get a little closer on the haircut quite a bit. So both of those work well with clippers. This one is slightly shorter, or width is slightly less than the clipper, so you have to be careful with the wall comb, where this actually will, the whole blade will be fixed behind that, so you can actually get a little bit closer and feel a little bit safer when you're going through and doing the clipping on that. So those work really well. I also use a barber's taper comb that I use to do some of the fine detail around the ear and the nape area. Works real well. And this is my cutting comb. It's a Sisebon comb. Got it from Hairbrained. You know, those that you recognize the color that they had done. But these are some of my favorite combs. I have them for everything. Anyway, work really well. But I usually will use anywhere from 3 to 4 combs on my clients. Like I said, it's not necessary, but for me, it's what works best for the tools that I'm using and speeds up the process. So anyway, going to be switching over now to doing a little bit of detail work with my trimmers and my little barber comb. So I'm going to go through and comb this forward and get some of that hair out of the way for the bulk of that. And just kind of following that C cup. I'm going to do a little bit of trim over comb. And then I'm going to use the fine teeth of the comb to get a little closer. So those of you who may have noticed, I was using the trimmer on that, and I had the wrong angle on the comb, and so it went a little bit shorter on the blend, so I'm just taking that blend up just a tiny bit in order to blend out that little mistake that I made. And you'll find that you'll have different hair densities, hair textures, that might change up what you're doing. So I have a couple of clients that are super dense here and super dense here. They're right above the ear. They barely have any coverage there. And so it looks normal when it's, you know, nice and long, but as soon as you take, let's say, a 1 guard to it, that 1 guard looks so, because of the I guess the hairs per square inch is such finer there, that 1 guard basically looks like a 0 guard, because there's so few hairs in order to create a shadow there. So you'll find that you're having to kind of go back and forth and doing a little bit of detailing when you're doing any kind of clipper work or anything like that, especially when you get down to these really short millimeters. Everything shows up, and so that's why it takes a little bit longer, because you have to spend a little bit more time in order to do everything. So this is pretty close to where I want. I'm going to switch over to a 0 guard now, or the half guard, and bring that up 2 clicks up to right in the middle. And I'm going to work right on that little bit of transition from the no guard and the shaver into the 1 guard. And there we go. All right, now I'm going to go through and do a little bit of the detail work around the ear. So I'm just holding that ear down, turning on the trimmer, and following that line across. Go through, again, a little bit of trimmer over comb, just getting some of that extra hair that's hanging over the side. Doing that all the way through. Give a little bit of a turn this way, and comb that hair over to the side just a bit, and then bring this down. Just stamping out that perimeter line. Switch out trimmers real quick. So I have a couple of trimmers. Whenever you're doing a lot of men's grooming, and you're doing like kids, different ages, different not only hair textures but different like skin types, to where some have really fine skin that can easily be, like if you have a real close gap trimmer that potentially can kind of nick them. And then I have some that are a little bit more of a generous guard that's on them, or the I guess the 0 gap isn't as close, and I save those because a lot of times they can get those a little bit more bulk hair, but it's really great for those really fine skin texture types where it doesn't feed up into it and isn't as sharp. So I find those work really well. So some of them are really fine or really sharp trimmers. They won't cut the hair quite as good on some hair types, and so I find that the wider one feeds into to the trimmer a little bit better. So I'm just going to go back through with this one. Any questions or anything so far?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, hi, Rob. Amy, can you see any of the people that are saying hi?
Yes, we.
Okay.
Melinda said yes. His voice is so calming.
I've always been told that I was a mumbler, so that is so good to hear. Thanks, Melinda. All right, so I'm going to go back through on the other side now and be doing the same exact thing. Let me see if I can turn them over. Can you see good there?
Yep.
Okay. So again, I'm going to go through with my clipper, no guard, all the way open. And you go through and corner the C-cup to corner the gear. And I'm kind of flicking out to try to avoid putting in a hard line there. Now granted, there is going to be a line, but the softer of the line that you can put in, it's a lot easier to blend out. So that was with the no guard. I'm going to keep that open, put in my one guard in, and go just maybe a pinky's length above. So not one of my big fingers, but my little finger, which is closer to like about 1/4 of an inch or so. And then I'm going to switch out from my one guard to my again, that's about another 1/4 of an inch or so. Just looking out, so I'm going to soften that section out. All right, now that we have that, I'm going to dust off this trimmer real quick, get some of the excess hair off. And then we're going to go through and I'm going to drop that down to about halfway and work in towards that bottom section. And now I'm going to go all the way closed and start to blend that out. And you'll find too that the different, the different hair colors makes a huge difference on how, like, a lot of the transitions show up. So for darker hair types and colors, it shows up night and day. You see a lot of the shadow. For the fair hair types, it's a lot easier to blend out. You can't, the shadows really aren't there in order to cause a lot of extra time blending. So there's a lot more grace that's involved with the fair hair types. So kind of keep that in mind too. That if you are doing somebody who is a little bit lighter hair on the blonde side, know that you might not need as much time as opposed to somebody who has really dark hair. That contrast between their skin and their hair is going to be highly noticeable. So you really need to spend time detailing that. But you get a little bit more grace on the fair hair type. So that seems to work really well. So now that I've gone through and gotten the bottom half of that, I'm going to go back through with the shaver and shave that out. Again, kind of working in little small circles. And so for those of you who are new or tuned in, I'm not a barber, so give me a little grace. This is, again, how I do things, and I'm just trying to show y'all, my techniques. I am by no means, an authority on this. I am, according to my name, I'm an aficionado. I really like watching and seeing the transformations in men's grooming. It was something that, I was beta trained as a cosmetologist, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it was just my appearance or whatever, I had a lot of male clients coming to me. And so by just having so many male clients, I really got to experience doing haircuts on all types of hair, and really was fascinated by that transformation that can happen within 30 minutes to 45 minutes from somebody who maybe hadn't had a haircut in a couple of years to completely transforming them with a haircut and a beard shape, and you know, that was a night and day difference with a little amount of effort and time. So that really piqued my interest. Again, being a little bit ADD, that 30-minute interval on the transition was really cool to watch. So yeah, again, if you have any questions, let me know. My daughter's going to be reading anything out to me, so thanks for everybody being here. Yeah, I'm reading some of them. I'm looking at it again, looking at a TV screen and doing the cut at the same time. So, all right, I'll get back to it. So anyway, we just finished the trimming there. I'm going to go back through and do a little bit of a softer transition. I'm actually going to use my rotor shears again. I'm going to do this time with the barber's comb and just go through and start to create a little bit of graduation slightly above the area that I just finished trimming. And we'll come back through. Again, I want to preserve the weight line that's there, but I'm going to come back through with the texture shears to kind of soften it up just a bit so that it's not such a harsh weight line. Texture shears now, and just go repeat that right above that area. I think now, I know when I first started in the industry, texture shears, you know, were kind of frowned upon, especially if you were like anywhere near any of the, you know, like say Sassoon or anything like that. Point cutting was the way to go. I find that all these tools were created for a reason, and so I don't, you know, again, have to go through the right process. I think it's key, and so I like using all the tools. If you've ever seen my shear collection, I use quite a bit of them. And even like in most of my men's grooming haircuts, I'll have a large 7-inch shear. I'll have a texturizing shear. Sometimes I'll have a chucking shear, and then I also use like a maybe anywhere from a 5.5 to a 6-inch cutting shear that I use for like scissors over hand or you know palm to palm, anything like that. But I'll use that for as well. So again, having the right tools just makes the job a little bit easier. So I'm going to come up that front section and get most of that length off of there, so we don't have anything hanging down. And then I'm going to come back again and do a little bit of trim over comb. I was always fascinated with barbers and stylists that could, with one hand, do that and do the trimming. Jared Worley, if you're out there, I am super impressed. And I think that is just, you know, a skill set for people that are very, you know, maybe not ambidextrous, but just dexterous altogether with their hands. These big sausages make it a little more difficult. So I tend to try to use 2 hands if I can. All right, now I'm going to go back through. I'm just seeing a little bit of detail work that I want to do right around that ear, kind of balance it out. 2 clicks in, 1 guard back on it, and I'm just going to go through and do a little finesse work, slightly higher, moving it up to 3 clicks or 3/4 of the way open, and just working my way up, and then finally all the way open. And all the way closed. And then I'm going to look on this side and look for a little bit of balance. All right, I think I need to go up just a tiny bit higher. So 1 guard all the way open. I'm going to take that up just a little bit more.
Young says hello in the chat.
Oh, hi, Young. Thanks for joining us today. I want to thank Amy Lee, too, for inviting me to participate. I learned early on to always say yes to any opportunity that kind of came within our industry. That has really taken me far. It helps me get out of my comfort zone. And so when Amy Lee asked me if I would love to do this, I said, sure. Knowing that it's going to be my first and only live, or not only, but my first live. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity. So again, I'm going to come back with my no guard on my clippers and open that up all the way. So for the bottom part of this taper, I'm going to keep it below the occipital bone. It's going to be a little bit lower than that even, to where I'm going to go from the nape of the neck right here where the hairline starts. I'm going to go up a good, almost 2.5 inches, right where that recession kind of comes down, or that occipital kind of comes down. And I'm going to be flicking out right about this moment right here. But I'm going to go through with the clippers and work my way up to that. So again, with it all the way open, I am not necessarily trying to get it skin tight on my first go. Again, because I don't want to put in a harsh line that I'm going to have to really work to get out. So I want a much softer line. So I'm going to work that up. Slightly above that. And something that I've always kind of struggled with, just within the way that I cut and my mind, the way that it works, I like moving to where the work is at instead of actually having the work move to me. So this is something that I'm still working on, 13 years into the industry or whatever. But moving the chair instead of moving yourself, save you a lot of time, save you a lot of trouble of getting the right lighting and everything. If you have the perfect lighting, why move around and try to do that? So move the client around instead. I'm trying to practice what I preach in that aspect. So again, moving that up a little bit, making sure I want a nice kind of natural taper there. So now that I have that set in, I'm going to go below that and close all the way and bald out this bottom section. And I'm going to stay about we're just going to follow that up with the electric shaver. And I like using the shaver after I sit in that closest line, as opposed to doing it at the very end. Now that I have that line marked out there, it's a lot easier to go through and shave that line and stop right where that line is at, instead of having trying to figure out if I've already blended everything so good that I can barely tell where I need to stop with the electric shaver. So I like to put that line in first, ball everything out from underneath it, and then continue working above that. So now that that's done, I'll come back and clean off my clippers, and we're going to put in a one guard, and we're going to open that up all the way, and we're just going to go about about a finger's length, maybe pinky's length above that. So I'll give you a little bit of turn there so you can see. And again, just working up and flicking out. And by doing this, you're going to get a smoother transition coming in, and then by flicking out on the way up, you're also softening that top part of that section, so it's a little less free to blend long term once you get into that section. And when you're using clippers like this with the guards on them, you want to go multiple passes, because not all the time will you on the first pass cut every single hair within that section. So a lot of times by going multiple passes on it, you're going to alleviate drop. What you want to do, now let's see.
A little bit of a lag.
Yeah.
It worked out.
Okay. I'll go back here and, so Sorry, got disconnected there for a second. Wasting my feed on this DVD. So again, going through with that one and blending that up. I'm going to switch that now over to a 1.5, just like I did on the sides. Again, with that open, and I'm going to go about a finger's length above that. Coming back. What I was saying though, if you, on fair hair and clients where you can't really see the transition, if you can't tell if you're cutting or not, be listening for the audio. When the clipper, when it makes the cut on hair, you'll hear the little crunch from the cutting. And a lot of times, you know, when you start getting into working with those little millimeters, when you're blending out those little fine lines, a lot of times visually it's kind of hard to tell if you're actually blending or you're trimming that section up. So be listening for that little crunch to let you know that you are actually cutting those hairs, and that'll help with that transition so that you know, audibly know that you're, able to cut those sections and you're getting that hair trimmed in that section. So anyway, just a little tip there. Again, I know most of you all probably already knew that, but for those that didn't, it's a great little tool. Now, if you work, in a salon suite or a real noisy salon, and the hair dryers are going, and that can be a little difficult. So, kind of play that when you're getting that little resistance of clipping. So, you'll have a lot of different keys to find out whether or not you're actually cutting that hair and when you start working on that real fine detail. So we've done that now with the 1.5. So I'm going to come back down now with the 1, and we're going to go 2 clicks down or halfway through the section. Give my client to kind of look down a little bit, and then I'm going to see a little bit more of that transition. So from that 1 open, I'm now going with that 1 guard halfway closed and start working on that line that's there and blending that out. Now I'm not using the full flat of my clippers. I'm actually just using like the 3/4 teeth there, and kind of think of it kind of like when you're doing point cutting into a section where you're going through to soften that little section out, or using the texture shears on a section to kind of soften that out so you don't have a real hard weight line. It's kind of the same thing with clippers. By using the corner, you're kind of point cutting into that section that has that line, and instead of using the full clipper to where you're going to be creating a full horizontal line again, by just using that little corner, you're actually point cutting into it and softening that line up. So you still keep that weight line, but it's not as harsh of a weight line. It softens it up a little bit. So again, just like point cutting. So again, 2 clicks in, working that little section, and rotating my client around. And again, just using that little corner just to soften it up. I can audibly hear a few little hairs getting cut each time I do this. And so I'm going to bring them back over and look again. I'm going to open it up a little bit more to that 3rd section, the 3/4 of the way open, and go up just a little bit higher. And once it gets above that, I like to use my scissors in order to do that. I'm going to bring it down all the way to all the way closed now. And I'm going to go just below that, try to get out that transition. All right, tiny bit of a weight line there. I'm now going to switch over to my comb here. And remember me telling you about having a lot of different scissors. So these are my chunking shears that I'll be using in just a bit. So these are my most narrowest, finest point pair of scissors that I have, and they work really great when you're actually going through and doing any work with a little barber comb, because you get as close as possible when doing this. And I find that I get a lot more control sometimes when I'm using my scissors or my shears as opposed to my clippers. So if I see a little detail work that needs to be done, and I don't necessarily want to go through and do that all with the clippers, I'll go through with the little fine tooth comb here and my little trimmers, and sometimes I'll even use my texture shears to kind of blend this out. But right now I know that there's a little bit of length there that I want to take out, and so literally go through and grab that and transition that up. flip it this way, and we're going to work again here. Look down a little bit. And we're just going and softening that up just a bit. I'm going to come back through with the texture shears in here in just a second. Since we're not going to be cutting any of this length up here, we're just doing this little nice little taper. Once we get into that transition coming up, I want to soften this up just a bit more, so I'll be using the texture shears to do that. But right now I'm just going through and getting some of this bulk down at the bottom to get it to transition just a little bit better than what the clipper by itself would have done. So again, scissor have come with us. You know, most of the work that we do when you're using clippers and everything is, a lot of it is done with the comb. Like, this is where the angle you have with the comb is what's going to help you avoid putting holes into the haircut and everything like that. So, opening and closing scissors, I think anybody can do. Opening, closing, or turning on and off the clippers, I think anybody can do. The real, I guess, like skill part of that is going to be knowing the angles you need to have, just like the angles you need to be holding for any kind of scissor cut, whether you're doing a graduation, you're doing a square layer or whatever, the different angles you're going to be holding it is definitely going to affect the outcome of the clipper or outcome of the cut. Same thing with this, the outcome of the cut is going to be directly affected by the angle of the comb. So, if I were to take a section like this and turn my comb in, I'm going to be creating a huge hole. So if I'm going to try to create a little bit of transition, I want to slowly work that comb on the out so that I am softening that as I come out with the comb as I'm cutting. And two, like this little fine detail work, I find it a little more control for me to do this with the scissors as opposed to having a big, clipper to kind of hold that section that is, going to take everything out all together at once. This tends to work for me a little bit better as far as getting the control that I'm looking for in that section. And so now that I got the majority of that transition the way that I want to, I'm going to go back through and I'm going to grab my texture shears, and we're just going to follow just above that and soften all of this hair up. Turn it back this way. Any questions so far? As I move through this section.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat so far as of right now.
So everybody, I have my daughter Vanessa helping me out with the live comments. There we go. I was looking for this. So if you have any questions, please reach out. Vanessa will read them to me, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. So I'm going through now and just re-wetting all of this. I'm using some light spritz. It gets a little bit of, I can get the section under control. It has a little bit more viscosity than the water by itself, so it stays in the hair a little bit longer and doesn't dry out as quickly. And it works really well too for just having it as a little bit of a style prep before you blow dry. There's not like a ton of grip that's associated with it, but it does help kind of alleviate a little bit of the frizz when you go through the blow dry. All right, so now I'm going to look at that section. I like to look from the back looking forward, and I want to see a smooth transition, and I'm seeing just a little bit of a ledge on that side, so I'm going to go through and try to blend some of that out. And same thing on that side as well. So with that, I'm going to go back through with the texture shears and just soften those little lines up. And so when I use the texture shears, I am cutting and I'm staying close to the edge of that section. I'm not necessarily going and bringing all that hair to the forefront. I just want the edge on that. So, like, I have a lot of clients that do not like clippers whatsoever. A lot of my male clients, they either had a bad experience with them in the past, or just do not like the finished product of the look with a set of clippers. It's a little bit too, I guess, too rigid for them. It's not as soft of a look. With the scissors, you get a little bit softer look. You can still get fairly close, especially if you're using, a little fine tooth comb. But I find that I can get close to about a one length clipper cut with just using scissors, and I have several clients that like that instead. But when I'm going through and doing a lot of the detail work, I'm usually just using the scissor work. So the texture shears really work on softening that. And two, like if you do have a client that has, kind of a hesitancy to using clippers, for me, kind of getting into like pricing and stuff like that, I separate all my pricing by the tools that I'm using. So I do clipper cuts, and then I also do scissor cuts. I don't necessarily do men's and women's cuts. I don't like, first of all, on the legal aspect of that, Texas has had several lawsuits associated with that for gender pricing, and then two, just you don't want to do that anymore. That's old school way of thinking. So whether you're charging by the hour or charging by the minute, find your way in order to be able to do that. That makes it inclusive for everybody when you are charging for services, not only for just their comfort and and coming to your space, but also, like in my state, for legal reasons, you want to make sure that you're doing everything possible in order to be on the up and up, not only with your, your business, but with your community that you're serving. So for me, I charge for clipper cuts, whether it's an express cut, which is just a quick cut and go, style and go, to a full service clipper cut, which is a cut, a shampoo, condition, hot towel treatment, mini face wash. So it's a little bit more of an elevated service, and I offer that, and have some clients that choose one or the other. With my scissor cuts as well, I have a lot of men who choose scissor cuts, and I'll do a very similar cut to this, but it's with scissors. And so what affords me more time is, and I'm able to get through the service a little bit quicker, is with a clipper cut, so I charge a little less for that. If I'm doing the whole thing with a scissor cut, well, I'm going to charge for my scissor cut, regardless if I'm doing a long layer haircut or if I'm doing a very fine, detailed, clipper over comb or scissor over comb, in order to do a really tight haircut. I find that just by charging by the tools that I'm using alleviates me from having to, really offend anybody in any way, and also stay compliant with my state and local regulations. So kind of look into that for yourself as well. I know that's a big topic right now. So find a way that works best for you and for your customers, and I think you'll be happy with the outcome. So for me, I've had this pricing ever since I can remember, maybe over 10 years now. So as far as the categories, it just seems to work well.
Amy Lee said, "This is good info," and oh, I love that. I love elevated services.
Yes, that's awesome. So now that I got that transitioned the way that I want it, I'm going to go back through on the other side, make sure that's good, and then if it is, I'm going to go back through and we're going to drop that top section and start working on it. So right here, you can see already I need to soften this up. So we're going to do that. So with these haircuts, when you're doing it in salon, when it's just a taper like this, we're doing a side and low taper in the back, they aren't very, lengthy services. You can do those really fairly quickly. Now granted, I'm sitting here talking, so it's going to take me a little longer, but as far as, a full service clipper cut that I would normally do, that would, spend my time all the way in the back and then working on the top, this is a lot less work in doing all of that. So because it is something that is very popular right now with the different kinds of haircuts that usually are, a lot of length, a lot of mass and bulk up on top, whether it's a flow where it's kind of, coming back that way, whether it's the Edgar, which is, real common down here in the South now, also known as the Taquache haircut. It's a good one. If you follow any kind of social media stuff, it's
classic.
It's becoming a cult classic for sure, and I think it's going to be one for the books, to remember. And I don't think that its influence is done quite yet. I think we're going to see a few more of those popping up by some celebrities here in the not too distant future. So I think I'm good there. I'm going to go through and just double check this here real quick. Again, just in a little bit of scissor over comb using my big wall comb to move through some bulk. I think we're good there. All right, so I'm going to drop this top section now. And we're going to go through, I'm going to spray that top section, and we're going to section them out. And I just do a center parting and drop them down. When I cut the top, right now I'm just going to go through and do a little bit of texturizing. I'm also going to just double check and make sure that there's nothing that is going to be hanging over. So I normally will go through and do a center part, front to back. And then once I get to here, I'm going to do the ear-to-ear parting just above and separate the front to the back as well. So when I'm doing most of my men's grooming haircuts, I normally will section out that little horseshoe section, keep it out of the way. Then I'll work on the cylinder section. So if he was getting just a regular standard haircut, I would go through and do the clipper cut service all the way around, however high or low that he wanted that, and whatever length that he wanted that. Once I was done with that, I'd bring this section back, split that on the sides, and what I would normally do is comb this section over to the side, and let me grab a pair of scissors. Let's do this. I would take a section, usually about 1 inch to 1/2 inch, and right where I would have finished cutting here, that would have been my guide, and I would come up and clip there and cut there. And basically cutting on section, working that to the front. Now if you wanted to save a little more length in the front, then I would start over directing as well. And so what we're going to do here is there is a little bit of overhang there, so I'm just going to do a real light trim and make sure that we get all of that so that we don't have anything kind of interfering with the total look that we're looking at to try to achieve at the end. Again, just a few little pieces that are there that are slightly longer than they need to be. And now that I want to start preserving some of that length in the front, I'm going to keep my hand stationary there and bring the length, if there is any, back to that section. We're done there. We'll do the same thing on the other side now. Go through, take that section. A little bit of overhang there. Just going to trim that up. Now we're going to be over directing everything to the back, keeping that stationary. And a lot of times that front section won't even make it to the back where you decided to keep that stationary. Now we're going to come back and we're going to work on this center section here. So now we're just transitioning on what we just tapered into that length on the top. Again, not a ton of hair to cut through this, because we're just doing that low taper. I want to make sure that we get a good transition down to the bottom, and then I will slowly work this way up to the top. Now we moved up to the next section. So I started down here, moved into the center section. We've got one more section up here that we'll be doing here in just a bit. Again, I'm only cutting probably a little less than 1/4 inch. Remembering that, in a month's time, most of us will grow about 1/2 inch worth of hair. So he's about almost 3 weeks out, so 1/4 inch will take him back to basically where our last haircut was, lengthwise. I'm just getting this to transition back here. On the top part, we'll barely be dusting anything because he kind of liked the length that it was at. So if anything, there might just be a few hairs that we're actually cutting there. Now that we have that all the way done, so we got this back section and these two sections done, taking everything out and back. Now I'm going to go through and comb everything over to the side, and we're going to work directly bringing everything up. So let's see. I think horizontally will probably be the best way to show that. So we go through and take a section here. Again, 1/2 inch sections to 1 inch of a section. I'll take that section, bring it straight up. And what ends up happening is I have a guide that I use to cut over here and a guide on this side. So when I look at my section, I actually have a short hair here and a short hair here where my guide is at. Now, I know that that's where my guide is at, but he's wanting to preserve some of that length. So instead of cutting to right there, I'm slightly going to go up and just get that little bit of a little less than 1/4 of an inch at the top. And I'm just going to do a little point cutting into that. And it makes it soft, it balances it out, and we are preserving a lot of that length in there so that our customer is happy with the length that it's at without taking too much off to where the style's a little differently. So again, sliding that up just a bit, so we're just taking out that little bit of a point that's created by cutting those two sides. Now, if my customer was wanting to go ahead and take a little bit of length off, we would find those guidelines and basically cut straight across or point cut straight across into that. But since we know that we were trying to preserve, I'm going to save as much as possible. And just hairs that are a little bit longer that have grown a little faster than normal. And again, if I wanted to preserve some of the length in the front, I would basically find a stationary stopping point to find out where I wanted that length to stay. Instead of moving my sections all the way up and working with it here, I would bring everything back. And that's what I'm going to start doing now, because as we start getting a little closer to the front. And in doing so, eventually I might not have any hair to actually come back and cut, which is totally fine. And this section is going to be my last one, because I know that there's barely going to be anything there. All right, so now I've cut sides, back, and top. So theoretically, you've done everything you needed to do for the haircut. So here's where my OCD kind of comes into play. And thankfully for my OCD, I found a mentor in the men's grooming world that had a little bit of that same OCD that I did. And so here's from Kirk Kiefner, who actually founded a lot of the curriculum for Beta on the men's grooming side. When I first got into the hair industry, he was launching a product line called the Men's Department. And when he did that, he created some curriculum to go with it and some cutting instructions in a curriculum. So I ended up getting a hold of that and learned a lot from him. So now that we're done with majority of the haircut, we're working on the fine details. So in order to go through and start to trim out the bangs, get them in the proper length that we want, a good way to do that, in order to get a good symmetry on the bangs and get a good transition from the sides, instead of just combing everything straight in front and cutting across, this tends to work out a little bit better and gives a more flattering shape for most male and most hairstyles. And now it's more of a kind of a squared look, so it tends to be a little bit more on the masculine side. But I mean, I've had several young people that have wanted, whether it's an anime picture that they bring in, something that they want a little bit more of a squared look, I can do this with it as well. And if I can do the same haircut and do some softer finishing work to make it a little bit more softer and a little more, I guess, of a feminine look to it as well. So you can kind of transition into all of that just by doing a little bit of detail work on that. So what I've done is just pulled everything over to the side. Where that guide is at, in the back here, I kind of pivot my hand out, and where I find that length, I'll go through and clip it. I kind of did that just real quickly without showing you. I'll show you on the next side for sure. But by pivoting that out and combing this over this way, I create a guide here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side and create a guide on that side. I'm going to go ahead and spritz that one more time. So again, just from basically right where the ear is at, right above the ear, going across to the middle of the forehead and bringing that section down. And you can kind of see the silhouette of the haircut as it goes through. I'm going to go through and come underneath that and bring all that into my hand. Set my fingers there, and I'm going to pivot out. Where that line, where that final hair comes out that way, that's what I'm going to be cutting. I've now created a nice little guide coming across this way. And so when I'm actually done, I'm going to bring everything over. come over down there and comb this in the front. And by doing so, now I have a guide on either side. And it's going to create a tiny bit of a point. There's my guide on this side, there's my guide on that side, and here's just a little bit that needs to be trimmed right in the middle. Check that length.
Hi, Christy.
Christy's in the chat.
Yep, Christy's saying hi.
Hi, Christy. So I know that he wants his hair to be right about resting on eyebrow. That was just slightly longer, so I'm going to go back through and cut another about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch off. We're going to double check that. I think that's going to be good with the length when it's dry. So now that we got the bangs cut, this is my final part that I normally do, or second to final part. I'll bring all that section up. I'll pull that up. There is my guide from the front that I just cut. This is the actual weight that's resting on the top, just like when you do regular bangs, that's what you're going to be doing. I'm going to go through and texturize this right here. Make that nice and even, and then I'll be coming back in here in just a minute. Again, there's my shortest guide there. I'm going to slide up to where that's gone, and then I can see what I need to cut here. And again, this is just a light dusting on this. We're preserving most of that length in there. And then we're going to come back through with some texture shears and give that a little bit of texture and a little bit of infrastructure. Again, shortest piece there. There's my length. And here, what I do is usually we'll just go through and take about 3 sections on each one, from the one side to the middle to the end. I do a little bit of my fine tuning here. Because I went through and cut everything horizontally, when I did my bangs, I left my bangs a little bit shorter than the rest of that, and so giving that nice transition to come all the way through, making sure everything's nice and even. And this little bit of detail, I mean, it adds a little more time to the haircut, but it's what makes a lot of my clients come back, because the haircuts grow out so much nicer by doing this. By softening up some of the edges, by going through and doing a little bit of detail work and cross-checking your sections, just like you would with a longer layered haircut or a pixie cut or anything like that. Spending a little bit of extra time on the men's grooming, I think it just elevates the service and sets you apart, I think, too, from a lot of the other men's cuts that are slap a one guard, do that real quick, and they're in and out of the door in 15 minutes kind of a thing. But I like a little bit of attention to detail. So I found a way to get paid for my OCD, so it works really well. So hopefully you can find something along the lines too that you can work with. And I'll go through and I'll finish that. And then last but not least, I'll go through this back section here and just make sure there's not a huge transition between the back to the front. Usually it's just taking up a tiny little corner. So not much there at all. And again, just a tiny little corner that I'm taking off there. Okay. So now this is going to actually be the last part that I do before I start styling. Is I comb everything from the center part down. And same thing here. I'm going to be doing some scissor over work, or scissor over comb work now here in a second. So what I do is I section out the bang section because I don't need to address that. But what I want to have is a smooth transition and not a huge overhang over the top and the sides here. So again, moving the bangs out of the way, combing that down. I'm going to come back through with the comb and do a little bit of scissor over comb work, just working up this way, transitioning, moving the comb up as I'm cutting. So again, you're getting a little bit of graduation doing it that way, and it helps kind of blend out and blur out some of the lines that are being created from the previous, haircut and some of the clipper work as well. And the reason why I do this at the very end as opposed to like right after I finish cutting is because I still hadn't cut the sides yet or the top. And once all that's cut, it's gonna lay totally different than it would have had I just cut the bottom and tried to do this blending out. I don't wanna start blending out something that I haven't even, had the chance to cut yet. It's like putting the detail work before the bulk of the work, so I like doing this right at the end. Any other questions? Awesome. So into the back now. Again, just doing a little bit of scissor work. Again, with the rotation. You can see why I would use the white combs, because you can definitely see the hair that needs to be cut come through that. And just kind of give you a little bit of contrast. Now with this hair, it might not be too bad, but when the hair is wet, it kind of makes it a little bit more difficult. But having a darker comb, now I can see this. You might not be able to see it on camera, but because of the light that I have, it's reflecting off of his hair, and it's really easy to see. But if his hair was a little darker, or I had his hair completely soaked, that contrast is okay. But I think that contrast for me, being right here, visually, it's a lot easier to see with a light comb than it is with a dark comb.
Christy said, such an efficient way to blend, and Amy said, love the scissor blending.
Oh, awesome. Now granted, this same scissor blending I'm doing right now can be done with a pair of texture shears, whether they're just your traditional thinning shears. A lot of my customers that have a real highly textured haircut, a lot of times I'll do that with the chunking shears, just to be able to have a little more texture put in there. But that's, for the most part, just about it. And just to have a little bit more detail and a little bit softer transition, and to get a little more longevity out of the haircut, I'll come back through what I just did and work with the texture shears just to create some little bit of, tiny little channels in there for this hair to grow into. As opposed to being longer and bulking out, now it has some peaks and valleys to kind of that hair to fall into, so it keeps the silhouette a little bit longer for the hairstyle. So come back in and just that.
Christy said, great idea to use a contrasting comb. Amy Lee said, can you get a little closer so we can see the technique for sure? Camera might shake a little as we move. Sorry about that.
So there's the section I'm holding up. You can see it's fairly dense section, so I'm just looking to soften and lighten that up just a little bit. So, and two, I can see a little bit of a ridge right there. So we're just doing the texture shears and moving the shears while we do it. That avoids having a harsh line using the texture shears. And two, you might have customers that don't want you to use texture shears because they had a horrible experience of somebody going through and grabbing it and cutting it right at the root or something along those lines. My texture shears, I only use on that last anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch towards the ends. I don't like going deep with those. I actually will go a little bit further into the section with my chunking shears and then maybe follow up with the texture shears just a little bit. But even with my chunking shears, I'm not going further than like an inch into the section. And that's only if, they have a good 2 or 3 inches to work with. If their hair cut is really short, I probably won't use chunking shears at all. So again, just going through, getting the section, combing it up, combing it out. So the tops of the teeth of your comb are tipped towards you. That's alliteration, I believe. So there you go. I'm just tipping those out to avoid creating a hole. And we're combing down to make sure that we are seeing all of the section that we're working with. again, clipping and working our way up in order to get that to make it a softer transition. So now that we have all that done, now it's time to go through and add some texture to the top. So for me, this is all done with the comb and the scissors. I'm literally going to be combing up, creating that little, 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch section, and I'm going to do 3 cuts horizontally across that way, comb back, and I'm going to do again. So I'm working in that front section, the mid section, apex there, and then right below the crown, or right at the crown right here. So just 3 simple cuts, bringing everything over to the side. We're going to do 1 cut there, 1 cut in the middle, and 1 cut on that side. Comb everything over, start again, 1, 1, 1. A little bit more real estate here, so we're going to comb everything that way and bring it up. Same thing here. Now we're getting to the wider part of the head, so we might have, instead of 3, maybe 4. 3, comb that over, bring that up, 4.
Amy Lee said this is great information, seriously.
2, 3. Awesome. Glad you're all enjoying it. Bring up final section 4. And then here at the back, we're going to go through and do 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So there's a good amount of texture. Now granted, that's all going to be residing on the tips here. So we barely dusted the top, knowing that it's been almost 3 weeks since he's had his haircut. That alone, just doing the tips, yes, it will give him some texture, but the other part of that is because of the length of the hair now, it might be a little wavy. So yes, this will be a great haircut, but he would probably, in about a week and a half, it'll start getting really heavy for him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still keep that same length. I'm just going to follow back through with, instead of using the little regular thinning shears, I'm going to move into my chunking shears and create a little bit more texture in there. So of course, they're hard to find. Ones that was for me at least to find one that I liked. Where this one I believe is like a 42 or a 40 tooth blade. The texture shears, you're going to anywhere from 8 to 10 actual teeth in that, and so it allows you to get a little bit more of a chunky look to it. And so I'm going to do the same principle that I had before and taking those 3 sections going across. But instead of being at that 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to be right about an inch or so, or 1/4 to a half. I'm going to be closer to an inch on that. Again, staying away from the scalp, but just a little bit deeper than what I did before, and maybe a little less number of passes as I did before as well. So I'm kind of just looking for some dense spots, and that's where I'll cut it. So on this front section, we'll just do like an inch section there, there, and there. Final section here. I really don't worry about going below the crown on this when I'm doing the texture on top, because this is where most of that hairstyle, most of the volume that I want to create is where I want it to be. Down here, I want this to be a little bit more collapsed of a section. So I'm going to go through, and here in a second, I'm going to be blow drying. I'm going to spray in a little bit of body from Sunlights, where I was using, the spritz, in order to keep the hair saturated and give a little bit of a kind of a cutting lotion to use. Now I'm looking to style it out, and so I actually want a little bit of like a bodybuilder in there, to create some volume, and then I'll finish it out with a little bit of the sculpt clay. So let's go ahead and we grab this real fast. So this is the body spray. As opposed to like a salt spray or any other kind of stuff. But again, I'm just going to go through and spritz the top section and the sides. Bring that over this way, and we'll do the front real quick. Dust them off real fast. Alright, I'm going to grab my blow
feel free to type in any questions you might have. I'm going to go through on the top section and blow dry them out, style them out. So another thing that I really get a lot of attention for, a lot of people ask me about, is when I am styling out. A lot of people that use like different pomades and stuff like that, normally they'll have the haircut, they'll finish it out, and then they'll just put like a load of pomade on it and slick it down in order to achieve the style. A lot of the looks that are starting to come out with the finished looks, there's usually a lot of volume up at the front, and for most of my male clients, they don't necessarily use like a blow dryer, or a lot of them it's just a wash and go, maybe throw some gel in their hair and then take off. With my younger clients I'm watching, they're spending a lot more time on the grooming side of things, where my older gentlemen, that's something that they just never did. So trying to show them when they bring in a picture or they have an idea of what they're wanting, their hair to look like, most of the time it's a finished look. So it's been, curated, it's been blow dried, it's been styled, and most of the time there's multiple products being used. There's a lot of different things that go into play with a lot of the men's grooming, especially nowadays. In most of the men's grooming nowadays, it's usually a nice tapered side or back, and then a little more length on the front, a little more volume that's included in that. So if there's hair textures that might be a little more difficult to work with, showing them how to do that and how you can break those salt bonds that are in the hair and style out the hair, and showing them the difference of using a heat and tension, heat coming from blow dryer, tension from the brush, to really recreate some of those styles that they're seeing in the magazines or that they're bringing to you, and really kind of show them out. So when I usually will start the process, I'm trying to create as much volume as possible, and so it could be a little disconcerting for somebody who's never had any of that done. But I let them walk them through it and let them know what the process is, so that they are a little more at ease when it comes to the finished look, so they're not surprised by it or anything like that. So I let them know that I'm going to be going through and blow drying, creating as much volume as I possibly can with the prep product that I use, which the prep, of course, being the body. When I'm done with that, I'm going to come back through with a styling product, which is going to be the sculpt from Sunlights as well, and actually start to collapse the shape that I just created, but preserve some of the volume that I created as well, as opposed to just slathering all that stuff all over. So here we go with the blow dry.
Also with the end goal being like explaining everything you are doing in the styling portion of it, so with the end goal being then being able to recreate it at home.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like an instructional video or instructional tutorial for my clients. Again, especially with my first time clients, I'll set aside a little extra time in order to be able to do that, because I know a lot of them don't necessarily do that to begin with, and two, some of their only experiences with their hair being blow dried is watching their wife do that in the or their spouse or a significant other or their partner do the blow drying, and a lot of times they have a lot more hair, so they're seeing 30 minutes and they're like, I can't do that for 30 minutes. So showing to a lot of the shorter hair clients that it only takes like 5 minutes at most for a lot of the styles. So again, having the body already in there, I'm going to go through the blow dry, creating a little bit of heat and tension. So tension's going to, of course, come from the brush. I'm going to brush back, flip it over, and create the tension, follow it with the blow dryer, and we're going to create the volume right up in front to kind of go back a little bit.
brush-wise, I usually will use two brushes. When I have a Denman vent brush, again, it works really well with using to create that tension and blow dry and create volume. You can also use a little round brush, which I have multiple, brushes that are like that. I have an ergo brush that is pretty close to the same diameter as my vent brush. That works really well if you're looking to create some volume. But then I also have another ergo. It's a little flat brush that I use for compression. So little wet brushes, or something like this. It's a little detangling, a softer brush. Where I want volume up in the top, I want a little bit more compression down on the back and on the sides. And so I'll use this little brush, little paddle brush. This one is actually curved a little bit, so it fits the head shape a little bit better. But I'll use this to create a little more smoothness. And smooth out the back and compress the back.
Real quick, Christy said absolutely. Whoop. Absolutely, after the guest leaves, a haircut will only be as good as the guest has been taught to style it.
Exactly. So a lot of people have been told they either have to leave it really long or cut it super short so that you alleviate having to deal with any kind of hairs that stick up or anything along those lines. You can cut the hair directly associated with the haircut that you have and leave it at whatever length that it needs to be in order to work well with that haircut. But you don't necessarily have to leave it long or cut it shorter. You can work with the growth patterns, and what you do in doing so is actually work with that growth pattern. So you can see it's most growth patterns kind of whirl. And so what you can do is just literally point that comb or put that comb right in the center of that and turn it into the direction that it's actually growing. By doing so, you are working with that growth pattern. You are avoiding working against it to where it's just going to stick up. But by putting that comb right in the center and giving it a little turn, you incorporate it into the hairstyle and get a good finished look without actually having to cut it super short, which is going to end up growing out and sticking up anyway, or leaving it really long to where it's going to be totally disconnected from the rest of the haircut because it has a significant amount of extra length on it. So just working with what you have. Now granted, you'll have some clients that have multiple growth patterns on it, so kind of play it by ear as how you're styling it out, but just know that there is a way to be able to do the haircut, keep it uniform, and still work with the growth pattern that they might have and not against it. So, and a good way to do that to find out what direction it's going is if you watch when I go through with a blow dryer, it'll kind of mess that up, but you'll see it try to incorporate into the direction it needs. You can already see that it's wanting to kind of come and break apart in this area. It gives me a little bit of insight as to, okay, I know that this is how it's kind of working, so when I go to put the product in, I can literally go through and put it in and come in and get it all the way where it needs to be. And so you can find out exactly where that pattern needs to be in all of that. And I'm going to go back to the side and collapse those shapes down. Blow dryer. A bit of detailing work. I'm just looking at the sides now that it's a little more dry, and I'm going to go through and use my chunking shears just to texturize the side transition there.
these down below. I'll be sure to try to put in a lot of the links that I was talking about for some of the shears and any of the tools that I'm using in case y'all are interested. I know for myself, anytime that I would watch somebody and they had something a little different that looked like it might make that job a little easier, I wanted to know where they got it from and everything. So most of the stuff can be found on Amazon or any of the distributor sites that you might be using. All right. And then finally, I'm going to go through and finish up with the styling. I'm going to use a little bit of the Sculpt clay. Probably about a dime size or so. Just emulsify it into my hands. I'm going to bring them over this way, and then I'm going to go through. And so we created all the volume. The last thing I'm going to do is roll this up and just smack it down and try to put it in. So what I do is I use my fingertips to allow the hair to pull it off of my fingertips. Instead of me trying to force it down in there, I'm just literally lightly going through. It's pulling it off my fingers. When it does, I just reload and do it again. That way I don't necessarily collapse that shape. Now I'm using the flats of my fingers to do the sides and get those down. I'll grab a little more product. Anytime you're working with a clay product too, if it gets a little dry to begin with, a little bit of body or spritz or something along those lines works really well in order to get that little pliable again. Go through, I'm using palms of my hand basically on loading now. Most of that product. Bring towards the mirror so I can actually see. Finish, I usually will go through and use my vent brush because it has a little bit wider tooth, wider display of teeth. It works really well in incorporating all of that. When I go to collapse the shape and blend that in, I'll use the flat of the comb, and then I will normally do my comb like this to work on the top section, and just to piece it out a little bit. It gives a really good look. Working with the growth pattern in the back, you can create that, disperse it out, and to where it's all going in the direction that it's growing, so you're not having anything necessarily stick up, and you can incorporate that into the rest of the hair. So that is pretty much it for today. I hope y'all liked it all. Looking at all the comments, I'm glad everybody was enjoying it. If you have any other questions, drop it down in there.
Okay, just scooch over.
Okay. Which way, this way? Okay.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. So anyway, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I will check that a little bit later on today and see, as well as post any kind of information from some of the tools and stuff like that that I have. But yeah, just reach out. Again, thank you, Amy Lee, for inviting me to do this. It's been really fun. Hopefully I gained a lot of information. I try to be real heavy on information. It's just the way my brain works and how I like to assimilate it. So hopefully it will work well for you. Again, any questions, just reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to answer them. All right, appreciate it, everybody.